Bobby, I hope you are having a great day, great night, wherever you're watching or listening in from. And today wanted to pop in for crypto happy hour, we might call it, or just let's sit back and watch Facebook get somewhat grilled a little bit by the U.S. government. And this has been an interesting few days, just kind of watching this all pan out and develop in real time. So I wanted to pop in here, bring up the stream, as well as add in a little bit of commentary as we continue to watch this stuff unfold. I don't believe it has started yet. Should be starting here in the near future. So as that does, we'll watch that, kind of commentate on it, and continue to just see where things are going from Facebook's end with Libra, the kind of mixed in commentary that we see with Bitcoin, and a number of other components. I think it should be pretty interesting to watch this one pan out. What's up, Chefs J Reef? Shout out to everybody tuning in on YouTube right now, on Periscope, and on Twitch. So we're streaming on all three. And like I said, waiting for the Committee on Financial Services for their examination of Facebook's proposed cryptocurrency. So this will be a good one. I think it'll be interesting, and really excited to hear your thoughts and feedback. Watching this yesterday was interesting. I mean, my initial thoughts on a lot of this for me personally. So we'll get into it before we'll get into this a little bit before kind of Facebook starts the process and we start to see this live stream from the government kickoff. But my initial thoughts on this, kind of off the top, is what Facebook is proposing to do isn't that necessarily interesting to me. I do think that they are somebody that has the capacity to actually deal with the government on a consistent basis. But what I do think is really interesting about all of this is how it's kind of bringing back Bitcoin and cryptocurrency into the forefront of the conversation. So it's going to be interesting to watch how that kind of continues to develop, because I do think that Bitcoin was kind of in the background for a while, and now you have sitting members of Congress and the Senate that are talking about Bitcoin, and some are incredibly well versed on Bitcoin, and some are not so much at all. Some really have no idea what they're talking about, and others. There was a video today on CNBC where, I forget exactly who it was, but there's a video today on CNBC where there was a member of the government that spoke pretty eloquently about Bitcoin and how it is different than Libra. So I do think that when you're looking at how all this pans out, is the one thing that, for I think the people that are really interested in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency as a whole, is you want to make sure that people understand there is a clear difference, a clear delineation between Bitcoin and between what Libra is proposing to do. And it does seem like anybody with who's tried to do any level of research within the United States government has understood that from the top. So that's been great to see. And since it's 10 o'clock in the morning, even though it's quote unquote happy hour, coffee hour, whatever, you got to go bougie with a LaCroix. Why not, right? Although if you're in Europe and you're already drinking, hey, tell me. Yeah, and Junie said this, and that's what I talked about a little bit on Twitter previously, was the congressman said the interesting part about Bitcoin is Bitcoin can't be killed, but you have these other networks out there that are in the position at this point in time where they're saying, hey, we're going to be decentralized. But the problem with the launch of these networks is they're launching in a centralized way at first, and that paints a massive target on the back of these networks. And it makes it really difficult to replicate where Bitcoin is at this stage in the game, because becoming quote unquote sufficiently decentralized is, I think, a really difficult thing for a lot of individuals to do. And when you think about how Bitcoin started, the reason Bitcoin is sufficiently decentralized in my mind is because when Bitcoin started, there was no economic value. There was not a ton of belief. It was a very organic process. When networks are starting now, they're starting with hundreds of millions, or tens of millions to hundreds of millions to billions of dollars of potential investment from venture capital firms, from large institutions, whatever it might be, that is obviously inherently centralized from the top. So the way Bitcoin started was completely really decentralized because the only people that were utilizing it were individuals that just kind of thought, hey, maybe this thing's cool and at some point in time it might have some value. And there's obviously a number of different things that we can look at, and I'm not exactly sure when the government, it's supposed to be at 10 a.m. When they're going to kick things off. But we have this beautiful slide deck that looks like it's. I mean, we got some sick graphic designers in the U.S. government here. But I think when you look at that, a lot of people do point to, okay, Bitcoin can't be killed, but what you can do obviously is clamp down on the on and off ramps, and that's something that Junie also mentioned is the counterpoint there. And to that point, though, Bitcoin as a whole in the United States, from an on and off ramp perspective, is already highly regulated. When people say Bitcoin is not regulated, and they're specifically members of the U.S. Members of the U.S. government or people like that, I think that's a total like charade and just lack of education, or they just don't want to be educated on it. Because if you try to buy Bitcoin in the United States right now, and a lot of other places as well, if you try to buy Bitcoin in a variety of other places right now, let's see if this is actually the right thing. Try and buy Bitcoin in a variety of other places right now, then the way that's going to happen is you're going to have to go through basically a KYC'd entity. It's going to be difficult to do so. You're going to have to comply with regulations. It's not just like you walk into the shop to give them $100 and say, "Oh, I'm on my merry way." There's a lot of regulations that are already drawn out for that. So while the utilization of Bitcoin, once you do have Bitcoin, is always, for the most part, unless you're like a blacklisted address or something like that, for the most part, it is highly decentralized. It's free. It's open. On the other end of the spectrum, though, the on and off ramps, regardless of if you're in the United States or any other government out there or any other jurisdiction out there, the on and the off ramps are always the place right now where other individuals, governments, foreign entities, whoever, they have the most control. That is where that they can kind of apply that pressure and make individuals do what they want to do. And it's something too that somebody mentioned as well. I thought it was a funny tweet the other day, yesterday, where and Junie mentions this: the way Congress is getting scared about just a white paper, speaking volumes about their confidence in the fiat dollar. I do think a couple different points. Number one, it is pretty incredible how much of a production this is off the top, and I'll take it. We're hanging out here. We're talking a little bit about how things are moving. So it is incredible how much of a production is basically happening because Facebook released a white paper. Number one, I don't believe that this is as much of and I've said this before, but I don't think this is much of a cryptocurrency thing as it is, oh my God, Facebook has the potential to kind of circumvent the fiat system and create their own create their own thing. And I also do think that the government as a whole going after Facebook, somebody was joking around saying it's going to be the first bipartisan effort in the US government for a while, because you have both Democrats who hate Facebook and you have Republicans who hate Facebook, and they're both kind of attacking them. I do think it's kind of like a virtue signaling thing, that it's the cool thing now to do is we hate Facebook and Facebook privacy is bad and this, that, and the other thing, and that may be right, that there's certainly elements to that in which that could be correct. But on the other end, I do think a lot of people are just kind of ganging up on Facebook because it's an exposure thing for them. It's I am the big bad congressperson that went after Facebook and I said mean things to them, and they were helpless to defend themselves, whereas Facebook's just probably going to shrug it off and do whatever they want to do anyway.
Holy shit.
So it looks like I'm trying to see here if we have. Oh, okay. So shout out to, we'll pull it up on Fox, I guess, is the one that has it. So, hey, we'll go over there. Classic government that stream's not working. Big shout out to the Crypto Bobby fans, because I think we had as many, if not more, people watching on here than we did on than Fox did. So hey, it is what it is. So I'll probably interject a little bit as we go on. I don't want to talk through this entire thing, because I think that would obviously be, it's, you want to hear this stuff, but I'll interject a little bit just as far as kind of my thoughts on where they're going, what they're shooting for, what the overall process of what the overall process of everything is. If you're watching this right now on YouTube, though, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, hit that like button. Helps to get the video out, spread it out to as many people as possible. And shout out to everybody watching on Twitch and on Periscope here too. Let's get the grilling started, guys. Come on, it's kind of schedule we running on here. 11 minutes late. Sad, real sad. And as you guys are kind of filtering in on YouTube and everything like that, make sure to just let me know your thoughts on what you think will actually happen within this hearing. Do you think this is going to be something that is very critical of Facebook? Do you think they're going to do well? Are you rooting for Facebook? Do you not want Facebook to do well? Would love to just hear your thoughts continually, monitoring the chat, obviously, as we go here. Shout out to Rec Podcast. I will eventually do an interview. I'm sorry, guys. I'm the worst. And so, guys, so I'll pull this up too. So if you're not familiar, one of the main individuals of this, basically of this hearing, is David Marcus, who was formerly the president of PayPal and then went on to be the VP of messaging products at Facebook, led Facebook Messenger for a long time, and then in 2017, I believe, or is kind of in 2018. Jeez, don't interrupt me.
The chair is authorized to declare recess of the committee at any time. This hearing is entitled Examining Facebook's Proposed Cryptocurrency and Its Impact on Consumers, Investors, and the American Financial System. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to give an opening. Libra and digital wallet Calibra, and their impacts on consumers, investors, and the financial system. Our first witness is David Marcus, Calibra's CEO. Following his testimony, a panel of experts will share their views on Facebook's plans. I have serious concerns with Facebook's plans to create a digital currency and digital wallet, and its efforts to enlist partners that expand its reach, like MasterCard, PayPal, Visa, Uber, Lyft, and Spotify. Facebook is apparently trying to create a new global financial system that is intended to rival the U.S. dollar. This venture is slated to be based in Switzerland,
So scared.
which has a history of a monetary haven for criminals and shady corporations. Facebook's plans raise serious privacy, trading, national security, and monetary policy concerns, not only for Facebook's over 2 billion users who will have immediate access to these products, but also for consumers, investors, and the global economy. In addition, Facebook has proposed backing Libra tokens with government currencies and government-guaranteed securities and holding them in a so-called Libra reserve to be governed by Facebook and its partners. Ownership of government assets on such a massive scale without proper oversight threatens to concentrate government influence in the hands of a few elites. Ultimately, if Facebook's plans come to fruition, the company and its partners will yield immense economic power that could destabilize currencies and governments. Facebook's proposed entry into financial services is all the more troubling because it has already harmed vast numbers of people on a scale similar to Wells Fargo and demonstrated a pattern of failing to keep consumer data private on a scale similar to Equifax. Facebook remains under a 2011 consent order from the Federal Trade Commission for deceiving consumers and failing to keep consumer data private. In the wake of the Cambridge Analytica scandal, in which Facebook provided 50 million users private data to a political consulting firm, the company will reportedly pay a record $5 billion fine to the FTC for data privacy failures. In addition, Facebook has allegedly insecurely stored user passwords dating back to 2012, paid unsuspecting teenagers to download spyware, experienced a hack of nearly 50 million accounts, and experienced a software bug that granted third-party access to 6.8 million users' photos. It has also been sued by HUD and civil rights groups for violations of the Fair Housing Act in what amounts to modern-day redlining. Facebook also allowed malicious Russian state actors to purchase and target ads in a campaign to influence the 2016 election. I'm also concerned about the lack of diversity in Facebook's upper ranks and fear that if these plans go forward, women and minority-owned businesses may be excluded from participating fully. In light of these and other concerns, my colleagues and I wrote to Facebook earlier this month to call on it to cease implementation of its plans until regulators and Congress can examine the issues associated with a large technology company developing a digital currency and take action. The Independent Community Bankers of America and others support this common sense step. Facebook's plans also raise larger concerns about big tech's expansion into financial services as it appears to inappropriately mix commerce and banking activities. So,
when can't
today
you
we
mix
will discuss
commerce
the
and
draft
banking
bill,
activities?
the
What?
Keep Big Tech Out of Finance Act, which would prevent large platform utilities like Facebook from becoming financial institutions and block them from creating their own currencies. Today's hearing is only the first step in our oversight and legislative process. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses. The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the committee, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. McHenry, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
We're here to go beyond the headlines. We're here to sift through the speculation and the hearsay. Here's just one of my favorite headlines, which asks, is Facebook forming a crypto mafia as Libra Foundation members boost each other's businesses? Washington must go beyond the hype and ensure that it's not the place where innovation goes to die. Just because we may not fully understand a new technology proposal does not mean we should immediately call for its prohibition, especially when that proposal is just that, a proposal. But let's face it, let's be honest, it's Facebook. And I'm skeptical, but we can either make you a political talking point or we can choose to conduct thoughtful governmental oversight. That's my hope for this day, is its thoughtful government oversight. The reality is, whether Facebook is involved or not, change is here. Digital currencies exist. Blockchain technology is real. And Facebook's entry in this new world is just confirmation, albeit at scale. The world that Satoshi Nakamoto, author of the Bitcoin white paper, envisioned, and others are building, is an unstoppable force. We should not attempt to deter this innovation. And governments cannot stop this innovation. And those that have tried have already failed. So the question then becomes, what are American policymakers going to do to meet the challenges and the opportunities of this new world of innovation? Some politicians want us to live in a permission-based society where you need to come to government, ask for its blessing before you can begin to even think about
I love this
innovating.
guy so much. I love him.
Those are the politicians that would rather kill it before it grows. But there are others who believe in the vibrancy of American ingenuity, American innovation, that recognizes our economy is built off of generations of entrepreneurs and innovators through competition, through testing, through tinkering, through iterating, got us here today. To be clear, it's not about advocating for a break it and figure it out later approach, but when it comes to finances, we must ensure that consumers and investors are protected. So, Mr. Marcus, let's get to work. Let's have that conversation. Let's answer those questions. Instead of a knee-jerk reaction of banning something before it begins, my Republican colleagues and I want to first try and understand it. And in turn, based off what we learn, determine whether or not our current regulatory framework meets the demands of this new technology. That's why we're here today. Look, I don't have a crystal ball. I have no idea if Libra will lead to greater financial inclusion, lower remittance costs, which have the opportunity and would mean families could send money to each other more cheaply and easily than today, or if it's just a ploy to shoot Facebook's Twitter mentions through the roof. We'll see. But what I do know is this. Republicans stand ready to work with innovators to successfully implement responsible technology here in the United States, here domestically, before we lose out to other countries around the world. So I ask my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join together in supporting innovation, ingenuity, and the entrepreneurial spirit that this nation was founded upon. I'm grateful for this hearing. I called on Chairwoman Waters to have this hearing a month ago, and this is a bipartisan approach to oversight. And with that, I'd like to yield the balance of my time to Mr. Hill.
I thank the ranking member. This time of hearing touches on critical areas of jurisdiction within our committee.
That was Patrick McHenry from North Carolina, for anybody interested.
To the use of and trading of cryptocurrencies and the intersections of financial services and big data. We therefore must ensure that we're asking thoughtful questions as we learn about and analyze these rapidly emerging trends. As a former community banker, I understand the importance with appropriate regulation and balance to benefit American consumers. And as lawmakers, we all need to ensure that all the companies that operate here in America with American consumers are in full compliance of those laws. America is evolving into a digital era, and we need to make sure that we're asking the right questions. I urge my colleagues to do that, but always trust but verify. Yield back.
You just dropped the...
Today we have two panels. I want to welcome our first witness, Mr. David Marcus, Chief Executive Officer of Calibra. David Marcus has been CEO of Calibra for the last 2 months and also identifies himself as working for Facebook. Prior to Calibra, Mr. Marcus explored blockchain and served as Vice President for Messaging Products for Facebook. He has also served as president of PayPal and other tech companies. Mr. Marcus, without objection, your written statement will be made part of the record. You will have 5 minutes to summarize your testimony. When you have 1 minute remaining, a yellow light will appear. At that time, I would ask you to wrap up your testimony so we can be respectful of both the committee's members' time and others. Mr. Marcus, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to present your oral testimony.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Chairwoman Waters, Ranking Member McHenry, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is David Marcus, and I'm the head of Calibra at Facebook. For most of my life, I've been an entrepreneur building products aimed at improving people's lives. For many years, my focus has been financial services. I became PayPal's president after it acquired my last startup, and I moved to Facebook about 5 years ago to run Messenger and more recently to lead our blockchain efforts. In my written testimony, I described the mechanics of Libra. Today, I want to explain why I'm optimistic about what Libra can offer the world. But before I get there, I want to make clear that we recognize we are only at the beginning of this journey. Federal Reserve Chairman Powell has said publicly that the process for launching Libra needs to be patient and thorough, rather than a sprint to implementation. Secretary Mnuchin reinforced those views at his recent press conference. We strongly agree with both of them. We will take the time to get this right. We expect the review of Libra to be among the most extensive ever. We are fully committed to working with regulators here and around the world. Chairwoman Waters, speaking on behalf of Facebook, I pledge to you that Facebook will not offer the Libra digital currency until we have fully addressed regulators' concerns and received appropriate approvals. I'd like to start by sharing the vision for Libra. Libra is intended to address an important problem. Imagine a daughter who wants to send money home to her mom in another country. Of the $200 she sends, $14 on average will be lost because of fees. It can also take several days or even a week for the mother to receive the money, a delay that can prove disastrous in an emergency. Not to mention, lines may be long and collection points may be in high crime areas. But it doesn't have to be that way. Wouldn't it be easier and safer if people could securely and inexpensively receive money transfers through their smartphones, just like they do for so many other things today? That's what Libra is about, developing a safe, secure, and low-cost way for people to efficiently move money around the world.
Facebook's really going after the remittance route.
Libra's promise, Facebook and 27 other organizations have founded the independent Libra Association. These include companies in the payments, technology, telecommunications, blockchain, and venture capital industries, and nonprofits like Women's World Banking, who is here today, along with staff from the Libra Association. The Libra Association will govern the Libra blockchain network and administer the Libra Reserve. It will establish the rules of the road and will prioritize privacy and consumer protection. And it will implement safeguards that require service providers in the Libra network to fight money laundering, terrorism financing, and other financial crimes. We expect these safeguards will at least meet, if not exceed, existing standards and improve the integrity of the global financial system. When fully formed, we expect the Libra Association to include 100 diverse members. Facebook will only have one vote and will not be in a position to control the association. Nor will Facebook or the Libra Association position themselves to compete with sovereign currency or interfere with monetary policy. In fact, the association will work with the Federal Reserve and other central banks to minimize the risk of any competition with their currencies or interference with their monetary policy. These are areas properly the province of central banks. Finally, I would like to turn to Facebook's role in realizing the potential of Libra. To facilitate Libra's use, Facebook has established a subsidiary known as Calibra that will offer one of many digital wallets on the Libra network. Using the Calibra wallet, consumers will be able to save,
same
spend,
speech as yesterday,
and send
at
Libra
least right now.
right from their smartphones. If this is successful, Facebook will benefit from more commerce across the family of apps that it operates. Calibra will be affordable and accessible and also be safe and secure with strong safeguards to protect users' accounts and information. We expect that the Calibra wallet will be governed by rules administered or enforced by FinCEN, OFAC, and the FTC. It will also be regulated by state financial regulators. Calibra is committed to protecting the privacy of its customers. The Calibra wallet will not share individual customer data with the Libra Association or even with Facebook, except for limited circumstances such as preventing fraud or criminal activity and complying with the law. I'm excited about the potential that Libra and Calibra hold, and I am proud that we have initiated this effort here in the United States. I believe that if America doesn't lead innovation in digital currency and payments, others will. If our country fails to act, we could soon see a digital currency controlled by others whose values are dramatically different from ours. I believe that Libra can drive positive change for many people and can provide an opportunity for leadership consistent with our shared values. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. I recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. Mr. Marcus, Facebook's 2.7 billion users entrust you with their most intimate thoughts, pictures, feelings, ideas, and sensitive information. Yet, at every opportunity to demonstrate growth, competence, and responsibility, Facebook has let us down. As I already noted, Facebook has a long list of scandals, including its repeated failures to safeguard its users' data. You've said that we don't need to trust Facebook because it will only be one of 100 members in the Libra Association that will manage this product and this project. But that's not entirely true, is it? The project was Facebook's idea. Facebook is spearheading it and recruiting partners. Facebook's subsidiary, Calibra, will provide consumers with a digital wallet to store Libra tokens. As I understand it, no member of the association has paid anything towards the project. So my question is, why should we trust Facebook to do these activities?
Thank you, Chairwoman. I think trust is really essential, and it's clear we've made mistakes. I believe we're owning these mistakes and working hard in remedying them and working hard at improving on all fronts. But as far as the Libra Association is concerned and the way that this project has been developed, we have invested everything that has been invested so far in Libra, you're absolutely right. And we have built all of the code base, the technology, up to this point. But we have also donated, if you will, the technology because it's now open source for the whole world to be able to use and leverage. As a result, we are not controlling the code base. And by the time we launch, we will be one of 100 members with no special privilege. As far
the
as
centralized
the
to
wallet is concerned,
decentralized movement.
I believe that the idea here often is that one day we will launch and suddenly 2 billion people will arrive on the Calibra wallet. This is not the approach we're taking. People will have to open specific Calibra accounts, so they're not going to be able to use their Facebook account. They have to open new accounts. And in order for them to do that, they will have to upload a government-issued ID to identify so that we can meet our KYC requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. I can appreciate that you understand that there is a trust problem here, given its disregard for U.S. law and its massive scale. I think foreign countries could find it difficult to effectively regulate Facebook, Libra or Calibra. It isn't clear the Federal Reserve or other U.S. regulators have the authority to regulate you. And yesterday, the Swiss regulator that you're saying would regulate you actually said that
Libra
it has
is
never
open
been
source if you guys want to
contacted
look at it. It
by
is in GitHub. A
Facebook
couple of you guys
about
were
this
asking about it.
project. So, Mr. Marcus, you responded to a request by members of this committee for a moratorium on your activities by stating that you would continue to work with regulators before going forward. But if the regulators lack the authority to adequately oversee you, how can you work with them to resolve concerns? Will you stop kind of dancing around this question and commit here in this committee before the duly elected representatives of the American people to a moratorium until Congress enacts an appropriate legal framework to ensure that Libra and Calibra do what you claim it is intended to do, which is to serve the public. Let me just say that we are all in support of innovation.
Yeah,
It's
okay,
not one side of the
sure.
aisle versus another side of the aisle. But if you talk to any member on this committee, they will know nothing about Libra. They will know nothing about Calibra. They
you
will
won't in
know
10 years
nothing
'cause you have no idea about nothing.
How it is organized. They will know nothing about the role that Facebook is going to play in this big association that now has 28 companies and looking to get 100 companies. And so, despite the fact that we all support innovation,
No, you
and
don't.
we all understand what is important for our economy to grow and for development and for the future of this country, we need to be on top of and understand something as massive as this project. And that does not say we don't support innovation. With that, I will turn to the gentleman.
She basically just said Facebook needs
yes,
to
if he
stop
has time to
development
answer.
until they get
Please,
the
go right
okay
ahead.
green light from the government, which I think is
Chairwoman,
ridiculous. That's outrageous,
I agree
personally.
with you that this needs to be analyzed, understood, and the proper oversight needs to be set up before Libra can launch. And this is in this spirit that we released a white paper very early before any launch so that we could have the time to engage with all of the proper regulators and central banks and lawmakers to ensure that we will get this right. And this is my commitment to you, Chairwoman. We will take the time to get this right.
Thank you very much. The gentleman from North Carolina, Ranking Member Mr. McHenry, is recognized for 5 minutes.
So I want to keep this simple. So, Mr. Marcus, I've read your white paper. I understand the nature of digital currency and digital technology. What is a Libra?
Congressman, Libra is a digital currency, a reserve-backed digital currency.
Is that a security?
We don't believe it is, Congressman.
Is it a commodity?
Congressman, based on current U.S. law, I believe it might be a commodity, but we see it as a payment tool.
Is it an exchange-traded fund?
It is not, Congressman.
Okay, so when you say that, so it's none of the above in any pure form, like other digital currencies, correct?
Congressman, it is designed to be a payment tool.
A payment tool. Okay, so if it's none of the above in our current regulatory structure, what I'm really getting at is how do you comply with regulations?
Congressman, the way that we comply with regulations is in a number of ways. First, as far as the Calibra wallet is concerned, it's registered as a money services business with Treasury and with FinCEN. It is applying and has received a number of state licenses and will operate the same way that other wallets operate. As far as
That's Calibra. I'm asking about Libra.
So as far as the Libra Association is concerned, these are active conversations we're having, notably with the working group of the G7, as well as FINMA, which is the Swiss financial regulator.
Okay, so there's tension between the notion of a decentralized currency or something decentralized and ultimately privacy and ultimately anti-money laundering and know your customer elements. These things stand in conflict with one another and very difficult things to resolve. In your white paper, you say after 5 years, there'll be a transition point. And you will go from a permissioned-based to a permissionless system. Post-transition, how do you reconcile the need for controls which allow you to comply with anti-money laundering and KYC, know your customer regulations, with that decentralized notion of a fully decentralized digital currency?
It's a very good question, Congressman. And the way that this will work is that the association will still have the ability to set the rules when it comes to anti-money laundering programs, CFT and KYC requirements for the network. And what we expect, even when the network transitions to permissionless without getting lost in the weeds, is that the vast majority of validators will likely be the ones providing services, so likely larger companies.
So you're saying in the nature of the wallet, that's how you get to anti-money laundering, know your customer, not the nature of the digital currency. So going to a permissioned, going from permissioned system with these nodes, ultimately 100, to a permissionless system, you're saying it's not going to be in the nature of that technology of a Libra, it'll be in the nature of the wallets on either side of this?
That is correct, Congressman, but on top of that, the Libra Association will continue to have an AML program and will still be under the supervision of FinCEN.
Okay, so getting into that question of anti-money laundering provisions, and complying with FinCEN, is your view that you're going to be like Western Union, or is it going to be your view that you're more like your former employer PayPal?
Congressman, I believe that it depends about the entities you're talking about. As far as the wallets are concerned, it will definitely be more like the PayPal types of businesses that operates in the payments space. And as far as the Libra Association is concerned, that is the conversation we're having because...
So is this your view, the development internally at Facebook, is for you to be a competitor to Alipay and to WePay?
Congressman, yes.
And to be a competitor to Venmo and PayPal, which are basically
Congressman,
the same.
so yes, we have a number of wallets that are working with us on the network side, but that will compete on the wallet side on the network.
Will that consumer data be kept separate or a part of the Calibra data collected from consumers? Will that be a part of Facebook's overall knowledge of consumers, or will it be separate and distinct?
No, Congressman, we will make strong commitment to keep that data separated from social data.
Separate and distinct.
Yes.
Final question here. So if you're seeking to be a competitor to Alipay and to WeChat, why are you doing this in Switzerland? And why are you using a basket of currencies? Why not the good old American dollar? And to bring down the transaction costs, which is seemingly the ultimate goal here.
Congressman, first, I want to say that the choice of Switzerland has nothing to do about evading responsibilities or oversight. The goal of Switzerland is to home this Libra Association in an international place that is the home of WTO.
Okay, skip beyond that.
And so that's really why. The second thing is, for the same reason, we would like for Libra to be a digital global currency, and as a result to be one unit of digital currency for the whole world. And this is why we believe it was the right approach.
Thank you.
The gentlewoman from New York, Mrs. Maloney, who is also the chair for the Subcommittee on Investor Protection, Entrepreneurship and Capital Markets, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Patrick
Thank
McHenry
you.
was pretty good.
Mr. Marcus, as you can see, there are a lot of questions about this project. It's big and very bold. Some would say it's too bold. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jay Powell, was in here just last week saying that he thinks it could be a systemic risk. The former chairman of the CFTC, Gary Gensler, is going to testify later that he believes it should be covered by the Investment Company Act. So we have a lot of concerns and a lot of questions, and I take it that it's a no to the chairwoman's question about requesting a moratorium on Libra until policymakers can figure out how to handle it. Was that a yes or no to her question
Please say no.
when she called
say
for a
no,
moratorium?
buddy.
Congresswoman, the commitment is that we will not launch until we have addressed all concerns fully and have the
Okay, I
proper
take that as a no.
Attaboy.
Okay,
Attaboy.
so what I want to ask you, will you commit right here in this hearing room to walk before you run? Will you commit to doing a small pilot program for Libra First, limited to no more than 1 million users and overseen by the Federal Reserve and the SEC? Will you commit to that?
Congresswoman,
big committal.
the steps we have taken, and this is the reason why we announced the white paper and the plans instead of launching and then figuring it out after, which is what happens sometimes with technology products, most often actually. In this very case, we are deliberate about taking the time to get this right. And
But that's seriously, in all due respect, that's not what I asked you. And given the lack of trust of people have in Facebook, you've breached the trust of users over and over again. Just last week, you were reportedly fined $5 billion for selling your users' private data without their knowledge or permission. So I would like to ask you again, will you commit to walking before you run?
Wow, Ludi.
Because if you go ahead and launch Libra without doing a pilot program first, there are too many risks. The Libra Reserve could be managing too much money, which could make it systemic. Too much money could be pulled out of banks in order to buy Libra, which former FDIC Chair Sheila Bair has written about and warned about. So the risks are very great.
Oh my God.
Now, personally, this is only my own personal belief, I don't think you should launch Libra at all, because the creation of a new currency is a core government function.
Get the hell
and
out of
should
here.
be left to democratically accountable institutions that are accountable to the American people. But at the very least, you should agree to do this small pilot program first, fully overseen by you and the Federal Reserve and the SEC. I think that's a modest request. So will you commit right now to doing a small pilot program first, yes or no?
Congresswoman, we will continue to engage with regulators and the working group at the G7 that is notably looking after the issues that you raised to ensure that however we launch this, it is responsibly and it is with the appropriate oversight and in a very responsible way. You have my commitment on that.
Well, if you will not commit to
How is he in the
testing this out
authority
as
to
a
commit on that? Are
pilot
you
program
kidding?
first, I think it's a reasonable request.
No, it's not.
But I think that Congress should seriously consider stopping this project from moving forward. Now, there's a lot of concern about Facebook. A lot of people think that it's really become too powerful, that it's become a monopoly. And now you're telling us that Facebook's digital wallet for Libra, called Calibra, will be the only wallet that can be embedded into WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. Given how dominant these two apps are, I think that raises serious concerns about market concentration and potentially monopoly concerns. So will you commit to allowing third-party wallets on WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger?
Congresswoman, may I answer the one point about what you said earlier? I just want to address it really quick, which is that the current system is really not working for people and for way too many people, and others are leading and plowing ahead, and I believe that if we
Please,
don't...
sir, would you answer my question? I get to ask the questions in this committee. And will you commit to allowing a third-party
Wants a lot of
wallets
committals.
on WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger? Yes or no? It's a simple question. Yes or no?
Congresswoman, other wallets are going to actually be interoperable with the Calibra wallets that will be integrated in WhatsApp.
So do you believe in competition and market access? If you believed in it, then you would allow them to be embedded also, third-party. Will you allow it?
Gentlelady's time has expired.
Thank you.
The gentlewoman from
How do these
Missouri,
people get
Ms. Wagner,
elected?
is recognized for 5
Shit.
minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm concerned that a 2020 launch date demonstrates deep insensitivities around how Libra could impact U.S. national security, the global financial system, the privacy of people across the globe, criminal activity, and international human rights. Mr. Marcus, I have a number of questions, so let's try and move as expeditiously as possible. Are you taking any steps to ensure that the dollar is not overtaken as the leading international currency that undergirds global economic stability?
Yes, Congresswoman, and the first of many steps is that the dollar is most likely going to be the predominant part of the reserve.
It's
which is the full
58%, generally
reserve.
speaking. Euro about 19. I don't know what your numbers are in terms of.
Well, Congresswoman, the dollar will be one of the predominant currency backing Libra, and then the other part is really the engagement that we currently have with the G7 working group, with the Fed, and with the Financial Stability Board. We'll continue to engage in those conversations.
I serve as also as the vice-ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and I'm hoping to understand how the U.S. government could effectively implement sanctions if Libra were to take off. As you likely know, North Korea uses cryptocurrencies to evade our sanctions all the time. If the Treasury Department demanded the Libra Association blacklist certain Libra addresses in order to comply with U.S. sanctions, how would Libra respond?
Congresswoman, I want to make a strong point here because it's really important. Whether Libra launches or it doesn't launch, there will be other networks. There are other networks. There are other cryptocurrencies. And those are not coming here.
You're not suggesting that it's okay if others
No,
evade U.S. sanctions, and it's okay if Libra does.
I am absolutely not saying that, Congresswoman, and that's why I'm saying that we are here and we are engaging with FinCEN. The Libra Association will be also registered with FinCEN, and we will have strong AML KYC program as well as from all of the wallets operating here in the United States, of course, full enforcement of sanctions and then some. So
Libra could have significant geopolitical implications. Frankly, from a human rights perspective, for instance, despotic leaders could ban Libra and penalize users. How are you approaching establishing appropriate human rights safeguards as you develop the Libra platform?
Congresswoman, I believe that one of the driving forces of the association being financial inclusion, we will have the right representatives around the table.
Which specific organizations? Because your folks sure couldn't answer that to us yesterday when I asked. Which ones are you specifically working with to address potential human rights impact?
So we have Mercy Corps, Women Worlds Banking, and Kiva that are already founding members of the Libra Association, and there will be more organizations that have dedicated all of their lives and energy in addressing the very problems that you're raising.
I'm curious to understand how you think the Libra platform would interact with Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which prevents state and local law enforcement from protecting citizens from illicit activities. For instance, if Libra is explicitly being used to further a criminal act negotiated on Facebook Messenger.
Congresswoman, Section 230, as I understand it, is relating to the Facebook technology product, and we have the protections of Section 230. I don't believe that this applies to payments.
Terrorists and criminals use Facebook to fundraise, to recruit, and connect with buyers. Facebook's moderation just does not seem up to the task, and Libra could make it, I believe, even easier for these nefarious actors to move money. Before launching Libra and potentially compounding the situation, how will you be addressing the digital back markets that run rampant on the Facebook platform?
Congresswoman, the first way we will do that is ensuring that on the Calibra wallet, everyone who opens a Calibra account has to identify with a government-issued ID, and as a result, we will have strong identity and a full staffed team to address
My time is expired. I yield back to the chair. I have other questions I will submit for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Velasquez, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Marcos, we do not want to stifle innovation, but we do have a healthy dose of skepticism. So this is not Silicon Valley. You cannot work out problems as you go. So all those problems need to be resolved and worked out before you launch Libra. So for the third time on this side, I pose the question to you. Will you commit yourself to not launch
That's so ridiculous.
Libra
Get
before
out of
all
here.
the concerns from the Federal Reserve and all the regulators are addressed? Yes or no?
Absolutely.
Yes or no?
Absolutely, Congresswoman, and I want to reiterate this commitment that this was the spirit in which we announced early, and we will do what's right to address all
I
things.
just want a yes or no answer. Thank you. So, Mr. Marcos, we gave the Federal Reserve increased oversight over non-banks. We don't know yet what you are. If the STOC designated you a CFI, would you submit to enhanced oversight?
Congresswoman, I don't believe that
But you don't know what you are, so.
No, but Congresswoman, the Libra Association or Calibra have no plans to engage in banking activities. As far as the Calibra wallet is concerned, we will be active in the payment space, like many other non-banks are active in the payment space. But that said, we will, of course, comply with all regulations.
So we want to make sure that companies that did not fall into the normal bucket of regulatory authority could not threaten the U.S. financial system. So I would like to ask you, according to the Libra Association's white paper, members of the Libra Association will consist of geographically distributed and diverse businesses, not-for-profit and multilateral organizations and academic institutions. Sir, by what criteria were the initial members of the association chosen?
Thank you for your question, Congresswoman. The way that the initial members joined was as a result of a wide outreach, and it's a combination of companies that can accelerate the acceptance and utility of Libra, like companies like Uber and Lyft and Spotify, that can accelerate the acceptance of Libra within current merchant networks like Visa and MasterCard, that can inform how to drive financial inclusion, like Mercy Corps, Kiva, and Women World Banking. And now we are starting, the Libra Association is starting that phase of welcoming more members that will be even...
Okay, I hear you. You want to get to 100, right?
That is correct.
Yes. So if a member were to determine that they no longer wish to participate in the association, what is the process for withdrawal?
Congresswoman, at this stage, we're in the process, all of us, the 28 organizations, of ratifying the charter. And as a result of this process...
So you don't know yet?
No,
That's the answer.
as a result of this process, if members do not wish to participate, they can drop, and there will be a process on an ongoing basis for members that do not wish to participate.
So do you think a member's withdrawal could threaten the value of the Libra currency?
No, I don't believe that's the case, Congresswoman.
Mr. Marcos, according to the Libra Association's white paper, the Libra Association has a target launch of the first half of 2020. When you expect the association's charter to be finalized, and will the charter be available for review by regulators, lawmakers, and the public?
Absolutely, Congresswoman.
According to, this question was asked before, so I will yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Point of clarification, Mr. Marcus, did you commit to the moratorium to Ms. Velasquez?
Chairwoman,
They love
I
committals.
committed to
Excuse
waiting.
me, I just need a yes or no.
Chairwoman, I just want to be precise. I committed to waiting for us to have all the appropriate regulatory approvals and have addressed all concerns before
Thank you very
moving
much.
forward.
Thank you very much. That's not a commitment. I wanted to clarify that. The gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank the Chairwoman. Mr. Marcus, again, thank you for being here. I wanted to talk a little bit about what appears to be a core business element for Calibra, and that is the issue of remittances.
He's right.
The World Bank says that the single most important challenge in remittances around the world is lack of transparency and cost, and it's the average global cost of remittances is about 7%. So tell me what fees you'll be charging for moving money inside the Calibra system.
Congressman, the goal for Calibra is to charge very little or nothing at all for P2P transactions, or for person-to-person transactions. We're hoping that we can offer that part of the service for free.
And then therefore on B2B or B2C, you'd be charging something
There will likely...
in Libra currency, fractional Libra currency.
There will likely be small merchant fees that will be competitive, very competitive with the current fees that are paid by merchants.
And inside the Calibra system, you'll earn revenue from advertising as well?
No, Congressman, no advertising in Calibra. The Calibra revenue streams, when we start working on that, which we haven't at all, and we don't plan to for a number of years, will likely be by offering a range of financial services and partnerships with existing financial institutions and banks.
And so in those remittances, which are so important to countries all over the world, we know what percentage of GDP remittances represent, particularly in Central America and Mexico. I think it's the third largest source of hard currency in Mexico, for example, 20% in Honduras. Both sides of that equation would be subject to KYC?
Yes, Congressman. On the Calibra wallet, you will not be able to open an account without having proper KYC.
And one of the issues in the third world, obviously, is they don't have a stable currency and are subject to inflation, terrible inflation. I think I read a note that 94 countries, representing 48% of the world's population and 16% of world GDP, experience on a regular basis 10% or more inflation per year. So is it your view that Calibra wallet will have a more stable currency than their local currency, or more stable value, I should say, than their local currency?
Congressman, the way we've designed the reserve, and again, subject to proper oversight and review from the G7 working group and others, is to have a very stable, value retentive digital currency. So yes, it will be a very high quality digital currency in a number of countries that are currently receiving a lot of their income from abroad. They will now receive a lot of their income from abroad in a stable currency that will retain its value.
What do you think, though, about, obviously, many of those same third world countries and some larger than third world have very strict controls on foreign currency. They have currency controls. They have currency boards. They don't allow their consumers to take action outside their home currency. They don't allow their home currency to be taken out of the country. How does Libra plan on dealing with that?
Congressman, this is going to be a country-by-country answer. There are lots of countries that have the problems you highlighted and that don't have currency controls that we think we can address right away. And then for other countries, it will definitely be a country-by-country approach. The one thing I want to highlight, though, is the fact that any wallet, not only Calibra, any wallet that is actually built on top of the Libra network will be interoperable with one another, meaning that to provide the value that we intend to provide for so many people, we don't need to be the only wallet. And in certain regions, it will be other wallets, but they would still benefit from interoperability.
I thought that was an interesting conversation with my friend from New York about the exclusivity of the wallet, Calibra wallet at WhatsApp, for example. You do plan on having, and you have 100 members that aren't interested in Facebook having any more monopoly than they do now. So would you have Visa's debit credit system available as a wallet?
Congressman, we will have a number of other payment methods for commerce on the Facebook platform and Instagram as well, including debit, credit cards, other wallets. And as far as P2P payments, there will be more.
There will be competition on P2P payments, even on Facebook's application.
There will be on traditional currencies, the same way that in Messenger you can currently use debit cards to do P2P.
Yield back. Thank you, Chair.
The gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, who is also the chair for the Subcommittee on Consumer Protection and Financial Institutions, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Marcus, thank you for your testimony. I can say with confidence that Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, and the entire subprime mortgage ecosystem did not set out to bring the global financial system to its knees. I can say with confidence that the legitimately brilliant minds and Nobel Prize winners, in fact, behind LTCM, did not set out to trigger the Asian financial crisis, but they nearly broke the global markets. And I can also say with confidence that the deregulation of the early 1980s and bankers did not set out to trigger the savings and loans crises, but it did. Not only that,
comparing Facebook to Lehman Brothers is a stretch.
Their logic and innovation, expanding access to financial services, and arguments of inclusion. And yet, they all broke the system. And the people at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder systemically paid the heaviest price. So, you may be speaking earnestly when you tell us the lofty goals, but I was here in Congress when Secretary Paulson came to us and told us we were within days of a complete shutdown of the global financial system. Now, I don't expect you to understand what that was like, but I assure you it was absolutely terrifying and one of my worst moments in Congress. Now, I want America to remain a global leader in financial services and innovation, and I believe that we have regulators, et cetera, that are the best in the world. But let's do this. Let's assume that Facebook manages to get even just 10% of its current user base to the Facebook Libra wallet. Do you understand that that would absolutely make you a systemically risky financial institution, and that we would expect FSOC to designate you as such, and the Fed to create a special regulatory oversight program for Facebook accordingly? Would you agree to this?
Congressman, first of all, I want to recommit. We will actually...
Yes or no?
Things.
Would you agree to this?
I do want to share that if we
Will
have
you
10%
commit?
of the Facebook...
I've only got a small amount of time.
Will you commit?
I want to answer your question to the best of my ability, Congressman. And if we had 10% of our user base, which is 200 million people using a Calibra wallet, we would be the same size of many other non-bank payments wallets around the world, including here in the US, including another one that is part of the association.
Let me reclaim my time. You're not answering my question because even banks, anybody that's holding money would be considered a bank. Well, let me ask this. Do you agree that, defined simply, an organization that holds deposits and makes loans is a bank? Similarly, banks in the past did issue their own currency or IOUs and clear their payments. Finally, some banks are run as nonprofit organizations or cooperatives. Therefore, both Facebook and Libra organizations planning to establish bank holding companies with full organization and capital structure we require to protect the global financial system from systemic risks and systemic collapse.
Congressman, we will not engage in banking services. We will focus on payments.
Well, you're taking people's money, right? And you're holding their money, correct?
The same way that you have Venmo and PayPal and Square Cash and a number of other payment companies.
So what you're telling me is you're not going to organize as a bank. You didn't answer my first question, which would put you under the regulations of FSOC and others so that we can make sure that there's no systemic risk here because of what you're doing in your size that could bring down the entire federal government, the entire financial services industry. But let me ask you one more. I got 40. In Dodd-Frank, we established the CFPB to serve as a financial regulator focused specifically on the best interests of consumers. Do you believe that the CFPB currently has authority over both the Libra organization and the Facebook Libra wallet? And why did you not conclude, do you think the CFPB have jurisdiction?
So many questions.
Congressman, we're engaged in conversation with all FSOC agencies, including CFPB, and it is not for me to decide who has appropriate oversights. But
so why didn't you did not include compliance with CFPB in your prepared testimony?
Congressman, this is because we're currently engaged with all of these agencies, and I wanted to share where we were right now at this point in time with the knowledge we have at this time. But we will have a more complete outreach by the time we are ready for launch, because we're going to take the time to get this right.
Clarification, I understand that you're absolutely opposed to FSOC's oversight and that you don't think they should be allowed to designate you as a SIFI. Is that right?
Chairwoman, I'm not opposed to any regulation, and we have had conversations with FSOC.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll move on to the next person.
They want to paint him in a corner
Gentleman
so
from
bad.
Missouri, Mr. Lukemeyer is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Over here, Mr. Marcus, thank you. You made a statement a while ago that you said that the current system is not working. And it concerns me because I think the current system is working. It's not working as efficiently maybe as you'd
For
like
rich
it to
white
see
guys,
that it
obviously.
works. But I think, you know, the system right now works because it's kind of like traffic control. You know, if you're on a country road and you have, you know, only 5 cars a day through an intersection, you don't need traffic control and you can go wherever you want to do, and it doesn't cost you any time to go through an intersection. If you've got an intersection that's got 30,000 cars a day going through it, you need some traffic control to go through there to protect people, for safety purposes, as to be able to transact, their ability to go through that thing in an efficient way. And I think, you know, you're talking about the size and scope of money transactions, and yeah, it costs a little bit of money right now to be able to transfer money around the world, but that's because of safety and security concerns, as well as the mechanisms that are in place to be able to do that. I think what you're trying to do is take away some of those costs, but we're concerned about the safety and transactional transparency of what's going on here. So the system is working, but you'd like to improve it, is what I think you meant to say a while ago. Is that right?
Congressman, first, I really believe that the system is not working for way too many people right now. And I don't believe that the reason the people who earn less and who have less pay more is because of the regulation and having KYC and AML. I believe we can do that at a much lower cost.
Okay.
I believe that technology can lower costs.
What you just said, though, is you agree the system is working, it's just not working as efficiently as you like to see it. Well, so I accept that. Something else you said a minute ago, a while ago you said that you want to offer more financial services as you go down the road. And just a minute ago you said you want to offer no banking services. So which one is it? Are you going to have deposits down the road that you pay interest on? Are you going to take deposits at all? Are you going to have lending that you're going to be doing to some of the customers? What kind of financial services or banking services are you intending to grow into?
Congressman, it's too early, but if we are to engage in those services, we will partner with existing banks and financial institutions the same way that other payments companies have done it. And I'm talking here exclusively about the Calibra wallet, and I think, you know, I need to be precise here.
Okay, with regards to the specific assets that you're going to hold in the reserve, who puts the money in, who puts the assets in to begin with, who owns those assets, what do you do with any dividends or interest or any returns on those investments that you make, who shares in those profits?
Congressman, the way the reserve is built is if consumers buy into Libra, the fiat money they use to buy Libra ends up in the reserve and is actually custodied with large banks, or potentially a better form of custody, even depending on the outcome of some of the conversations we're having with the G7 working group and the recommendations that they will come with. And so the reserve is always proportional to the number of Libra coins in circulation. And if the reserve generates a return, it will be used for two things. Number one, to pay for the association and the operation of the whole Libra network. And number two, to return some of the investment back to original investors and backers of the system that will put a lot of resources to get it off the ground.
You know, one of the things that, as we look at this, you know, if I have a business and I'm trying to sell, you know, 1,000 widgets to some company in France, and I want to use the Libra system to be able to facilitate this, when I get done with this transaction, I have an income off that. And so I have to report that to the IRS. So is there a cost to change back from the Libra to the dollars so that I then can explain to the IRS the kind of transaction and kind of you know, money I'm earned off this transaction? Is there a fee for doing that when you transfer it back from Libras to dollars?
Congressman, there will be probably small fees because there will be agents and exchanges that will be involved in the process of converting fiat into Libra and back to fiat. But from an IRS and tax standpoint, as far as the Calibra wallet is concerned, we will have the proper tools built into the product so that people can report their taxes.
Okay, my time is up. Thank you.
The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Yes,
goes
Mr.
on for a
Marcus,
long
over
time.
here, this direction, this way. All right. Now, I've listened very attentively to your testimony and to the response of several of my colleagues' questions here, Ms. Waters, even Mr. McHenry, and you keep mentioning your white paper as a defense to the answer to their questions. But I want to call your attention to the fact that neither your white paper nor your subsequent Facebook posts offered any concrete details as to how you plan to implement or enforce strong anti-money laundering, how you plan to enforce know your customer protections, and most importantly, to ensure, that's what all of us are concerned about, the safety of our financial system. So right now, tell us, what specifically, don't say the white paper, what are you going to do? What do you see as the responsibilities of Libra to combat anti-money laundering, to protect our financial system? Could you tell us right now? Just point it.
Yes, Congressman. Two parts to that answer. First, at the Libra Association itself. Libra Association will be based in Switzerland, but will still register with FinCEN, and as a result, we'll have an AML program, and we'll have guidelines for all the members to enforce the right KYC standards, AML, CFT programs. As far as the Calibra wallet is concerned, for every account opened, we will ensure that everyone KYCs appropriately with government-issued ID, and we'll have very strong AML programs.
Okay, but what about this, Mr. Marcus? Currently, the full responsibility to file suspicious activity reports are on our banks or other money service businesses, which law enforcement uses to investigate and prosecute criminal terrorists. And in your July post, you spoke only of the ability for these law enforcement and regulators to conduct their own analysis of off-the-chain activity. So, do you feel that this represents a shift away from Libra's own responsibility to monitor and enforce anti-money laundering or customer protections?
No, Congressman. The reason I wrote this is that the approach that Libra is taking is using a blockchain, and blockchain gives additional visibility to law enforcement and regulators compared to the current system to conduct their own investigations instead of solely depending on banks or regulated entities self-reporting. But that doesn't mean that we on the Calibra wallet side and all of the other members operating on top of this network will not have very strong AML programs and will not file suspicious activity reports.
All right, so now you're marketing this currency as a new entity to financial services. And with that will surely come new and innovative methods of committing financial crimes. What you bring is new. Criminals out there are going to invent ways to deal with it. So let me ask you, what are you anticipating as some of the new ways that criminals may attempt to export and exploit Libra for illicit use? And how are you combating to do this?
Let's just give away our security ideas.
New.
Let's do that, right?
But you also got to have the ability to be able to not just look down the road, but be able to look around corners to see what that criminal has in store for us. What say you?
Couldn't agree more with you, Congressman, and I believe that we can improve on the current system because we have a chance this time around to think through the way that the network is designed, the way that the on and off ramps are properly regulated with proper KYC controls, the proper way to monitor activity and report it with new technologies. And I think that this system might be potentially better on these fronts.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus.
The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Huizinga, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and there is so much in so little time. I'm going to try to go through and get to some new territory. I was not planning on doing this, but you had used the term fiat currency a couple of times, and thought I knew what that meant, and it seemed a little odd that you were using it in the way that that you were, and so I went to Wikipedia. Fiat money is a currency without intrinsic value that has been established as money. Fiat money does not have use value and has value only because a government maintains its value or because parties engage in exchange to agree on its value.
Somebody can read Wikipedia.
Wikipedia might need to update its definition a little bit because we see that, that people are using cryptocurrencies with no backing. And I am curious, why do you feel the need to have a reserve? Because it strikes me as you're using a fiat currency to create a fiat currency and to have a reserve of that.
Congressman, the reason we have a reserve is that we believe that to create a high-quality payment tool, we need that digital currency to be very stable. And as we've seen with a number of other currencies out there, digital currencies, they're very volatile, and as a result, they are not very good medium of exchange or payment tools.
So it's a trust issue.
No, Congressman. It's a stability issue. It's an inherent
Well, I guess stability
quality
and
that
trust.
good money has, which is, you know, if it's stable, then it's good money. If it's not, then it's not.
But couldn't your stability be influenced by people's trust levels of the currency?
Yes and no. So, in other words, the way that
You fit perfectly into Washington with both a yes and a no,
it's a
without
subtle-
hesitation.
it's
Okay.
a-
It does strike me, though, as a little bit as many non-banked and underbanked, as you have said, is one of the goals of trying to get in it, get them involved in the financial space. Oftentimes, they are not in that space because they have a distrust of financial institutions, and it doesn't take anyone much time to find some well-publicized issues of trust with a number of the companies that are involved in Calibra, and so I'm not sure exactly how you're going to address this, but let me get back to the regulatory implications of this. I had the pleasure of being the chair of the Monetary Policy and Trade Subcommittee at one point, as well as the Capital Markets Subcommittee, and I'm the ranking member now on that. And as I've always said, as we've been looking at these crypto assets, cryptocurrencies, and as the ranking member had asked, is it a security, is it an exchange-traded product? What exactly is this? Is it fish or fowl? And it seems that it's more of a platypus to me, that it kind of evolves in its different parts. And I'm curious, are you able to actually maintain the core and essence of a cryptocurrency and asset if you're really under all this regulation?
We believe we can, Congressman, because we believe that in order for any form of digital currency and payment system to reach mass adoption,
So
it
would
needs
you
to be
like to see
regulated.
all of the other crypto assets and cryptocurrencies under the exact same regulation that you are, or are you trying to create and carve out this new product?
Congressman, I can't speak for other crypto assets.
Well, certainly you must have some thoughts on that, because if you're looking at it going, well, that's not working for them, otherwise, why would you be coming and asking for this regulatory?
This is a dangerous corner.
Because we believe that this is a digital currency. If you compare it to other digital currencies or cryptocurrencies, it serves a different purpose. This one is to serve a purpose of payment. It's a payment tool. And as a result, when it reaches so many people, we believe that appropriate regulation and oversight is required.
So as we were having a little confab up here, and my friend French Hill said, this, you might be the equivalent of American Express traveler's checks of days of old.
I don't think of it that way, Congressman, but
Okay. Well, yeah, for the lower dais and the staff, those were things, they were actually paper, and you carried them with you. You bought them at a bank, right? You actually put in a fiat currency in towards it. But, all right. There's my time has dwindled, I'm sorry. We've got a lot, and I have one last quick thing, which is, the chair had asserted that you had not been in contact with FINMA, with the Swiss. Is that true or not true? Because you had said earlier that you have.
Congressman, we have been in touch with FINMA. The other agency was the privacy agency that we have not reached out to, but FINMA we have had continuous engagement with.
And I'll be following up with some written questions, so thank you.
The gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Perlmutter, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I'm going to kind of take off where Mr. Huizinga just left off, just to help me understand the deal. So I have $5. I go and I buy 1 token of Libra for $5. You take that $5, and what do you do with it?
Congressman, the $5 you would use to buy Libra would end up being in the reserve. And so in the current contemplated basket, it would mean that $2.50 will be in the reserve, and another $2.50 of your dollars will be in a basket of euro, pound, yen, et cetera, in the reserve. And as a result, because the reserve is 1-for-1, your Libra unit of value will always be backed by the same value in the reserve at all times, guaranteeing stability and low volatility.
And that reserve is in the cloud, that reserve is in a bank, that reserve is where?
That reserve is custodied with very large global banks that provide custodial services to a number of companies. But this is something that we're also in discussions with the G7 working group to ensure that there's proper regulatory oversight in how the reserve is managed and how it's custodied as well.
All right, so we've got this medium, this currency of some court called Libra, and now it's half here, half there. I want to use it. I want to buy something in Paraguay. So, which if I were using dollars was going to cost me $4.
Love this guy's accent.
So how do I do that? Do I then go to Colibra? And Colibra is like my credit card, and it wires 4/5 of a token of a Libra to Paraguay?
Congressman, you would use any of the wallets, Calibra being one of them, to transfer the money that you wanted to transfer to that other country. And the way it would work is the same way that you would use any payment apps here in the US, like Venmo or PayPal.
So it's a wiring system, more or less, except that I'm using Libra. I mean, Colibra is a wiring system. I mean, it's just Venmo, you know, I Venmo my daughter $20. Okay, it's just done, it's wired, it's over. I mean, I could have gone to the bank and they could have wired it to her, but I use Venmo.
It's very similar to your experience on Venmo, Congressman.
See, I think what we're struggling with is, what are you? I mean, you're a medium, you're an intermediary, you're facilitating financial transactions. And it isn't as if we haven't had problems with that in the history of the world. You got a money changer in the process, turning my buck into a Libra to a euro. So that's biblical. You've got, you know, I mean, the transaction is something we've had from the beginning of time. But it's a faster kind of wiring and more immediate transaction. Am I mistaken in that?
No, Congressman. It's also much lower cost for the people who end up needing it the most.
And I appreciate that. I mean, but for us, you know, we've seen banks fail. You know, we had the old saying, what's good for GM is good for America. And they had to go through a Chapter 11 back in the recession. You know, I don't think that'll happen to Facebook or whoever's backing this whole process. But it's possible. It's certainly possible. And so our responsibility is to your depositors or the people that buy these tokens or that use your credit card system. And so we're trying to figure out what kinds of regulations. And I think you're getting really good questions from both sides of the aisle because we all have this same question for you. And that's the resistance you're feeling because we think you're a bank, but you're not quite like a bank. And if you're a bank, we regulate the heck out of you because we've seen a lot of people lose money where there hasn't been regulation. So that's the resistance that I feel. I want to support your innovation. I want to support the efficiency that you people believe you're bringing to the table. But I also don't want anybody getting hurt here.
Congressman, we're completely aligned on that. We don't want anyone hurt, and we want the proper regulatory oversight, and this is why we have announced our plans very early, and we're here and engaging with all of the regulatory bodies here in the US and around the world to ensure that we have the right regulatory framework and oversight, and we address all the concerns that were raised today, yesterday, and that were raised by Chairman Powell and others.
Thank you for your testimony.
The gentleman from Wisconsin's Mr. Duffy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Marcus, how are you doing? I got to tell you, this is absolutely brilliant, innovative, creative, and to come from Facebook and to leverage your network is pretty amazing. I was shocked at how bright it was. Not that you guys aren't bright. But quickly, who gets to use Calibra and Libra?
So anyone that can open a Calibra account, go through KYC in countries where we can operate.
You know, this is a $20 bill. Do you know who can use a $20 bill?
Yes, Congressman.
Who can use it? Or who can, maybe better question, who can't use a $20 bill?
I believe the answer to your question is anyone.
Everybody can use a $20 bill. This $20 bill doesn't discriminate on anything. You could be a murderer, you can say horrible things, you can say great things. This $20 bill can be used by every single person that possesses it. With regard to your network, can Milo Yiannopoulos or Louis Farrakhan use Libra?
Congressman,
and I bring that up because you know both those two individuals have been banned from Facebook.
Congressman, first, I want to say that...
No, simple question. Come, this, no, but give me, we only have 5 minutes. You got to answer a question so we can do the best job in vetting what you want to do.
I know, but we must be thoughtful about those issues, Congressman, so I'm trying to respond appropriately. So, you know, on one side, I just want to stress that a platform that enables you to communicate and share ideas, Facebook, we believe, is a platform that accepts ideas across the political spectrum. It has to protect consumers from hate speech and others. And so that's one thing. When it comes to money...
I don't know. Can Milo use it? Can Louis Farrakhan use this system? They've been banned from Facebook. Can they use it? Yes or no?
Congressman?
Yes or no?
I don't know yet, Congressman.
Okay. If I'm a gun dealer who I can use a $20 bill because, you know, if it's a lawful gun, that happens all across America. On Facebook, you don't allow gun sales. So can a gun dealer who's abiding by American law, can they use your system?
So this is a question that is really important to get right, Congressman, and we haven't written a policy yet.
See, and that's what concerns me. I love what you're doing, but when we say we at Facebook are going to set the social policies of who can use this cryptocurrency, in a way, we get to set the social policy of who's in and who's out. And what's great about this is everybody gets to use it. And what I fear is, maybe in a roundabout way, what's happening in China with their social scoring. You get the right social score, you can get a loan, you can get an apartment, you can access the train. Maybe Facebook is doing the same thing here, where if you meet our social standards, which a lot of people here don't necessarily agree with your social standards, though we use your platform, that's the way you access the network. So we have to conform our behavior to the standards of Facebook to be on the network, where I think the right answer would be, listen, everybody, if you're abiding by the law, has access to this system.
Congressman, personally, I believe that we shouldn't be in the business of telling what people can do and deciding what people can do with their money or not. But that being said, this is an important question, and we need to be thoughtful about the policy.
But I think you're going to get some major pushback when when we look at your network and you say who's on and who's off, and you're the judge and the jury. And for this system, I think you're going to see a lot of pushback, I think, from both sides. Go ahead.
This is why I believe we need to be very thoughtful about this, and my commitment to you
I think
is
the
that we
thoughtful
can
answer
follow
is,
up.
I'm going to behave like the fiat currency. The thoughtful answer is, if you abide by the law, you have access to it. That is the thoughtful and the right answer, but you haven't given me that, which gives me great pause and concern that the model of Libra is going to be the model of Facebook where we get to decide, and that concerns me. I'm also concerned about the data privacy and how you're going to use the data. A lot of us have had concerns about the data use on Facebook. How will you use this data? Because now what we post on Facebook and who we're friends with is one thing. How we spend our money is really powerful information, and you have access to that too. And I'd like to dig deeper with you on that point, but also, the freedom and liberty that comes from the 20, I think you should offer that same freedom and liberty on your network, and maybe we can talk more about that later. And I appreciate you coming and testifying, and kudos on the innovation. I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you. The gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Himes, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Marcus, thank you for being here. This has been one of the more interesting hearings we've had in a little while. In the last Congress, I had the honor of chairing the New Democrat Coalition of 104 Democrats, and if we do one thing, we get excited about innovation. But this is not an app that measures your heartbeat. This is a complete overhaul of the circulatory system of the global economy. So a lot of the concern you're hearing here, I think, is just around its sort of shocking ambition. And I want to ask you a specific question and take you through a specific scenario that gets at a larger concern that I have. And just so that folks at home can kind of follow along, let's just imagine that I'm an American user of Libra. And my rent is $1,000 a month. And just for simplicity's sake, let's say that this month it's 1,000 Libra a month. Now, because Libra is backed by a basket of currencies, let's just imagine that one of the currencies, sterling, devalues dramatically in 2 weeks. I think, if I recall my banking and economic days, that I will find that in the next month, my rent in Libra will be, let's just pick a number, 1,100 Libra, but still $1,000 a month. So you know what I'm getting at. Users will have the profoundly unfamiliar experience of assuming foreign currency risk. Am I correct in that?
Congressman, yes, there will be fluctuation, but the way that we're intending to design the reserve, again, in consultation with the G7 Working Group of Finance Ministries and central banks, is going to be in such a way that we have looked historically at the volatility that the dollar would have had in the last 20 years compared to Libra with the proposed basket. And if you look at the fact that half of the basket is dollars, it should be fairly stable. That being said...
But wait, you acknowledge, I got it, you acknowledge that consumers everywhere, users of Libra, will for the first time, if they have previously been using their domestic currency to purchase domestic goods, they will experience foreign currency risk.
They will have some degree of volatility.
Right. Okay, so my question, I think that's an important point for people to understand, and I'm not saying that's good or bad, but traditionally, the regulatory apparatus here has said that if you're going to assume an unfamiliar risk, that risk will be disclosed to you with full transparency. And the mechanism we have traditionally used to disclose that kind of risk is through public filings and disclosure. Now, you said this is not an exchange-traded fund. I'm a former banker. This looks to me exactly like an exchange-traded fund backed by a series of short-term instruments in foreign currency. It looks exactly like an ETF to me. It even has a creation and remittance mechanism. So elaborate for me on why this is not an exchange-traded fund, and if there's any ambiguity, what I really am getting at here is you need to clear, if in fact the regulators determine that it's an ETF, you need to clear 1940 Act registration hurdles. which that may sound technical, but that's designed to protect that rent payer who discovers that their rent went up for reasons they don't understand. So tell me why this is not an exchange-traded fund.
Congressman, 3 points of why we believe it is not. Despite the fact that you're right, that it uses some operational mechanisms that are similar, we believe that it is not, because Libra is a payment tool. And typically, if the question you're asking is whether we believe...
But wait, I need to stop you there. The SEC doesn't say if you're a payment tool, you're not an exchange-traded fund. The SEC says if you have a security that is backed by other securities, you're an exchange-traded fund. And you may quibble with me that you're not a security, but you're certainly backed by other securities. Is that not correct?
Congressman, it's mainly currencies, but I do want to answer your question. First, we believe that no one will buy Libra as an investment because it is designed for stability. That is number one. Number two is that when you look at the definition of the securities, or how we test, that has been used by the SEC, it actually uses the idea that you invest for a profit that will result in the management of the product. And this product is not a product, it's a payment tool. It's not going to be actively managed. And you cannot use an ETF for payments. This is actually designed as a payment tool to enable people to retain value, not to
So since I'm almost
value.
out of time, let's come back to my original question. How will you make transparent what you acknowledged is foreign currency risk that consumers will face? How do you envision doing that?
Congressman, as far as the Calibra wallet is concerned, you will have transparency and education built into the product.
Okay, thank you. My time has expired. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Stivers, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Mr. Marcus. We all say we want to encourage innovation, and I appreciate your innovation, and I really do want to encourage innovation. And I'd just like to kind of walk through a timeline so we know where we are in the innovation process here. And correct me if I'm wrong, or I'll just ask a couple yes or no questions. It was about 60 days ago you announced the idea, correct?
Congressman, it was on June 18th, yes.
June 8th. That was the white paper was on June 18th, but I thought in May you put out there was nothing in May? Okay, so we're 30 days from the white paper. So this is a really early congressional hearing. I just want to, and with that, I'll understand that you won't have the answer to every question. I do appreciate your commitment to be willing to ensure that you, meet all the regulatory hurdles and comply with the law. The value I see in this innovation is, of course, for cross-border payments because that's so expensive today. And second, for the unbanked, and you talked about both of those domestically. But can you just tell us what's in it for somebody domestically that already has a bank account, and isn't looking for cross-border payments? I don't see a big application for those folks.
Congressman, I'm glad you asked, because I doubt that people will pay their rents with Libra anytime soon, to just relay the question earlier. The general use case that we believe will happen in the U.S. When you have a bank account and you're properly banked is that if you want to send money abroad, you will connect your debit card with one of the wallets. You will buy just the right amount of Libra you need to actually make that cross-border transaction. You will save a lot in the process, but then if money comes back, you will redeposit it back to your bank account.
And so you don't expect people to be holding Libra, because the point is to have a stable currency, not a volatile currency. That's where the value comes in cross-border payments, because about 60% of the world's population lives in a country that does not have a stable currency. So I appreciate that, and I think there is some value in that. I do have some concerns about the potential of money laundering. As you know, cryptocurrencies and the Silk Road sort of started as a way to anonymously finance illicit activity, or as one of the early things that was used for. So I'm concerned about cross-border payments that then are going to people that have sort of bad intent. And I'm curious, will you put a limit on the amount of any individual transaction? And I know, again, it's early. I recognize the timeline of where we are. but do you expect to put a limit on how much somebody can transfer in Libra to someone else?
Congressman, we're going to continue our engagement, notably with Treasury, on this topic. And my expectation is that there will be limits depending on where the money is sent or where it's coming from. My hope is that between two consumers of American regulated wallets like Calibra and others that will have proper KYC and AML, we can avoid having artificial limits. But we will probably need limits across the network to ensure that those activities can.
And I'm not asking you to put artificial limits in. I was just curious, and obviously I want to make sure you comply with Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering, because that is that's complying with the law, which you said you'd do, and I think that's really important.
Congressman.
Do you expect to have the Libra Association vote to exclude companies like Chick-fil-A or anybody else that might have social views that you disagree with?
Congressman, this is actually not going to be my decision or Facebook's decision. It's going to have to be a decision that is going to be taken by the Council of Members of the Libra Association and the Libra Association itself.
And I recognize that. I would just urge you, to not use this for social engineering, but use it to meet the intent that we talked about of helping the unbanked and helping people with cross-border payments. I hope that's the purpose and not just social engineering. I appreciate your time today. There are a lot of unanswered questions. I may send some in writing. I do appreciate the innovation. I appreciate your time. And I look forward to working with you as you work to make sure that you follow every law and regulation. I know it'll be a challenge because you'll be dealing with, 200 countries' regulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Congressman.
The gentleman from California, Mr. Sherman, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, we need to get Mark Zuckerberg here. This is the biggest thing, or it tries to be the biggest thing this committee will deal with this decade. And while we have one of his employees here, this is Zuckerberg's program. Now, we're told by some that innovation is always good. The most innovative thing that happened this century is when Osama bin Laden came up with the innovative idea of flying 2 airplanes into towers.
Wow.
That's the most consequential innovation, although this may do more to endanger America than even that.
Excuse me.
People call this the Libra. It's not the Libra. Nobody, if it finally happens, nobody's going to call it Libra. They're going to call it a Zuckbuck. This is Zuckerberg's baby. Now, Mr. Marcus gave me 2 promises in our conversation yesterday, both of which he knows they won't comply with. First, he promises that all the Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering is going to be adhered to. But that applies only to the Calibra wallet, and he hopes to have hundreds of other wallets created by others. Keep in mind, as to Bitcoin, 46% of the transactions, according to one academic study, are for drug dealers and other nefarious operations. Hamas advertises they want Bitcoin contributions. Bitcoin, however, has a problem. There's no off-ramp. There's no way to just go buy something with a Bitcoin. You can eventually with a Zuckbuck. And finally, the white paper put out by Facebook says, the Libra protocol does not link accounts to real-world identity. A user is free to create multiple accounts by generating multiple key pairs. So this is a godsend to drug dealers and sanctions evaders and tax evaders. Zuckerberg has billions, but he doesn't have the authority to print more until he gets this. We went from the U.S. dollar. We went from the U.S. dollar being linked to gold, and we only printed a number of dollars equal to the gold we had to the dollar becoming valuable in and of itself, and now we can print. How many dollars we print has nothing to do with how much gold we have in store. Mr. Marcus promised me that they would never do that, but then he testifies here that the Libra Association will make all the decisions and Facebook won't be in control. So much for those promises. America's power comes from the power of the dollar more, I think, than the power of our military. It lowers the interest rates in the United States by at least $1,000 a family. The seigniorage has allowed the Fed to transfer $100 billion in some years, so often less, to the Treasury. Our sanctions in Iran, which I've worked on for over 20 years, are effective only because of the power of the dollar. And we are able to go after human traffickers, drug dealers, and tax evaders because of the power of the dollar.
This guy's the worst.
We're
Literally
told
the worst.
that they're going to solve two problems. With this, they're not going to solve those problems. Cross-border transmission, let's do that in dollars. Or let's send Quetzals to Guatemala. You've got a multi-billion-dollar company, trillion-dollar company. Help people make those transmissions at low fees, but what, use dollars or use the local currency? And then we're told they're going to deal with the unbanked. If they wanted to help the unbanked, they wouldn't be using a cryptocurrency because cryptocurrencies are illegal in India, the place where they have more unbanked than anywhere else. They don't want to solve those problems. They want to solve two other problems. Problem number one, Zuckerberg can't print money yet. And problem number two, Zuckerberg is under attack because he invades the privacy of ordinary Americans and sells it to the highest bidder. He needs to be an advocate for privacy. And so he is creating a device which will provide privacy to drug dealers, human traffickers, terrorists, tax evaders, and sanctions evaders. We need Zuckerberg here because we need to tell him that he probably has the power to push this through. He'll throw around tens and hundreds of millions of dollars in Washington.
And you're going to be balding.
His supporters will get huge Zuck bucks in U.S. dollars. 100 lawyers will tell him that what he's doing is legal and therefore he's safe. But someone with an understanding of the politics of this country needs to explain to Mr. Zuckerberg that if cryptocurrency is used to finance the next horrific terrorist attack against Americans, 100 lawyers standing in a row, charging $2,000 an hour, are not going to protect his rear end from the wrath of the American people. This is an attempt to transfer enormous power from America to Facebook and a number of its allies. I'm surprised we need Zuckerberg here.
Did you get anything? The hell was that, Brad
The
Sherman?
gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Barr, is recognized
The biggest
for 5
clown.
minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I think given the commentary we've heard in this committee hearing today and some of the very pointed questions directed your way, Mr. Marcus, I think we are discovering why a decision has been made to locate in Switzerland as opposed to the United States. Having said that, I do want to address some of the concerns that have been raised today and ask you about them. I think there are some legitimate questions that we can ask, but it does seem like in Washington, whenever the private sector produces some kind of innovation or new discovery or new advancement, politicians and bureaucrats rush to criticize and regulate. And there's always a presumption that the private sector innovating is a bad thing. I think the presumption should be totally reversed. I think we should presume that innovation is good. It presents enormous opportunity for financial inclusion, reducing friction in transactions. The opportunities that are created by this innovation is laudable. It's to be commended. That's not to say we shouldn't ask questions, but the presumption in this hearing room today seems to be in the wrong place. Let me ask you about the possibilities, the opportunities that this presents, particularly with respect to financial inclusion. What percentage of users on Facebook are underbanked or unbanked in the United States, Mr. Marcus?
Congressman, I don't have the answer for Facebook specifically, but I know that over 8 million households in the U.S. are...
Why don't you know how many Facebook, Facebook is often criticized for invading the privacy of Americans. Why doesn't Facebook know approximately how many of its 2.6 billion users are unbanked or underbanked?
Because there's no way for us to know that information.
Okay. Do you have any idea how many users of Facebook live in rural America or so-called bank deserts?
I don't have the exact number, Congressman, but we can. I can find out and follow up with your office.
Well, I mean, if you know or don't know, we'd like to know that. how will Libra and Project Libra promote greater financial inclusion in the United States?
Congressman, we believe that having the ability to access digital money where you can safeguard the value that you want to safeguard, but more importantly, transact with the people that you want to transact for free, simply with just a $40 smartphone and a basic data plan is something that would enhance the ability for people, even here in the US, despite the fact that we believe this is not going to be the main market for Libra. It will solve problems for lots of people here in the US, notably the very people who are unbanked today and send money abroad home, which makes for the bulk of the income of their families back at home.
Well, I won't ask a question, but I will just jump on to the point that Mr. Duffy was making earlier. I think that the opportunity for financial inclusion with Project Libra is enormous and very positive. I share Mr. Duffy's concern about what that inclusion actually means, and to the extent that Facebook and other social media enterprises have been criticized for political bias, I think that's important to earn the credibility of the American people that this platform, this financial platform, be viewed and earn the confidence as a neutral player. So that the adoption can serve all and really serve that ultimate purpose of financial inclusion. Final question, and this relates to the testimony that you've delivered, that this project will not compete with central banks or interfere with monetary policy. We've heard from the chairman of the Fed, Jay Powell, recently that whereas Bitcoin or other digital currency endeavors really do not present a challenge for central banks, that this could, because of Facebook's 2.8 billion users and the 1.6 billion daily users, that it does have the potential for widespread adoption big enough to potentially displace the US dollar as the world's reserve currency and therefore interfere with central banking tools, interfere with a monetary policy. Tell me how Libra will not undermine sovereign currencies and the power of central banks, or is the very point to undermine central bankers and to provide a greater freedom away from central banking?
Congressman, I want to be very clear. We do not want to compete with the dollar or with sovereign currencies. This is why they make the reserve. And even in our wildest dreams, never will we come anywhere close from the size of any of the currencies that you mentioned. But we will make sure to work with the Fed, with the Financial Stability Board, and with the G7 working group internationally to ensure that the proper controls and
The
oversight
gentleman's
are-
time has expired.
Thank you.
The gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Foster, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to also thank you for over here. As the, I guess, the co-chair of the Congressional Blockchain Caucus, as well as perhaps the only blockchain programmer and AI programmer in the U.S. Congress, I want to thank you for having rather detailed individual briefings with me on this. And there are a couple of things I was promised during those briefings that my staff tells me have not yet been delivered. One of them is when we got into a detailed discussion of how you would prevent this from being used for ransomware. I was promised that there would be an answer. Are you prepared to give that answer yet? If not, I'd like to drill down into just how anonymous these transactions in Libra actually would be.
Congressman, ransomware is a really important issue. And the way we're thinking about it, as far as the Calibra wallet is concerned.
No, I'm interested in Libra, all right? Libra, which is, as I understand it, an anonymous bearer instrument. Is that correct?
Congressman, it is not anonymous.
Is self-custody allowed in Libra?
Congressman, yes, within limits. And as a result, we believe that especially in countries like the US and others, you will have all the wallets that will have...
I'm not worried about wallets, I'm worried about abuse of self-custody. You know, if I own the cryptographic code for a piece of Libra, do I own that Libra full stop or not?
Full stop.
Yes, you do. Okay, now if I go on the dark web and start offering to trade that, Do you have any technical way of stopping me for doing that anonymously?
Congressman, yes, because there are on and off ramps, and all of the on and off ramps are properly KYC'd.
All of them?
Yes, that will be.
So that once a
role of these-
large fraction of Libra would be transferred into self-custody, and then there starts to be a significant flow among the self-custody entities out on the dark web or other places. How do you prevent that from actually, allowing things like ransomware?
Congressman, again, a very important problem, and the way that we're tracking, the way that the association will enable tools so that law enforcement and the different wallets can understand where the movements are happening to prevent those issues is going to be one of the ways that we will address this. The other way that we will
So
address...
just a minute, we're going to have to be absolutely dependent on the fact that every single wallet is in a regulatory regime that we trust. Is that right? So if there's one wallet out in some, some set of islands or something
protocol
like this,
he wants
that
freezes
doesn't
at the
follow
protocol
US,
layer.
Are we just out of luck there, and that all of the illicit transactions will flow through there?
No, Congressman, because if you're a U.S. resident and you want to use a wallet, the wallet offering services in the U.S. will need to be properly regulated in the U.S.
All right, we have to have an ongoing discussion. I'd like to also mention cybersecurity. One of the main jobs of FSOC is to oversee cybersecurity and systemically important firms. Now, you've seen fit to make a new programming language for here, and I spent a little while looking over that. There's some creative stuff in it. Some of it's pretty much copying other things that have been done before. Some of it's brand new. But even if it had zero creativity in it, there would still be a problem that one wrong line of code could generate a hole that could crash the entire Libra ecosystem, right? And so the governance of that language and all the infrastructure, I understand, it was my reading, you're going to be distributing runtime executables and things like that as well. And so that all of that has to be bulletproof cybersecurity. And I was wondering how you're going to deal with the governance of that.
Congressman, two ways. First, we agree with you that this is of absolute importance. And the way we're dealing with that is that the move language that you're referencing will have formal verification in place to avoid issues.
To the extent that there are no compiler bugs.
Yes, but the compiler, the compiler will not execute the code if the code is not formally verified. And we have the chance of having David Dill, who is a professor from Stanford in formal verification, helping us with this issue. The other thing that I want to say is that the association will have guidelines on what third-party code can be published or not. And at the very early stages, it will be very limited to a set of templates that will avoid the issues that you're raising.
All right, but it will be an ongoing target because if Libra is taken to scale, it will be an enormously fat target for cyber attacks, intrusion, insertion of insider threats, and so on. And so this is something that is in terms of overall financial stability, probably as crucial as anything else. Thank you. Yield back.
The witness has requested a 10-minute break. The committee stands in recess.
Heyo. Well, so now that they're having a 10-minute break, we can talk a little bit about what's been happening. First of all, shout out to David Marcus for going through this entire process so far and not having to go to the bathroom, because if I was getting grilled for 2 hours, I definitely would have had to pee. So I think that's something, it's pretty commendable that he was able to do that. I mean, that was a whole mixed bag. You have, to be honest, to me, it seems like the Republicans on one side of the House were trying to say, basically, we want to foster innovation and we think that we shouldn't kick technology out of the U.S. because we're scared of it. And then on the other side of the House, you had Democrats basically saying, Facebook is the worst company to ever happen to the United States, and that you need to commit to us that you are not going to do anything before you get completely authorized through us. Both sides were pretty aggressive about just Facebook in general, which is certainly understandable. But I've seen kind of two different sides of the. I've seen two different sides of things. Mic glitch. Oh shit! Hold on, let me fix that. Son of a bitch. Give me a sec. Hey, hopefully you guys can hear me a little bit better now. Let me know if it's still glitching. Apologies on that. So that should hopefully audio fine. I'm being censored by Congress. No, I'm kidding. Still glitchy. Let me know if it's still glitchy. If not, then we're screwed. I think it's, to be honest, I think it's OBS. Give me 1 second. But let me know if we're back. If not, apologies on that. Good now? Okay, sorry. Every once in a while. Okay, sorry. Every once in a while, so I use OBS software, and every once in a while that goes and just absolutely drops the ball. So sorry about that, guys. Hopefully you're all still good. You can still hear me all right. My bad. But yeah, outside of that, so I mean, I think the big thing that is somewhat interesting about kind of how this process works, and what we're seeing is the two different sides of the aisle basically both united in the fact that they quote unquote don't trust Facebook. But from what I saw, you had the Republicans saying, you know, we want to foster innovation, but we want to do that intelligently. You have the Democrats saying we don't want to foster anything that we want to make sure that this is not going to break anything before it gets put in place. I do think David Marcus was able to talk around things pretty well. So that's something that, I mean, there wasn't really much new said in this. You had a bunch of people getting out their own frustrations against Facebook. The fact that Brad Sherman compared Facebook's Libra coin to Osama bin Laden and two planes flying into the Twin Towers is absolutely ridiculous and outrageous and idiotic. And Brad Sherman should be ashamed of himself, because that is a freaking joke. So something else that you I think is just worth thinking about in general. Let me see. It looks like I'm running into issues with right now with OBS, because I have apologies on the way this looks at this point in time. So I don't know why my computer is just absolutely dropping the ball. I have I have 500 megs upload right now, so it shouldn't be anything on my end, but apparently it is. So sorry that I am super blurry at this point. Let me see if I can fix that. Really annoying. It's really, really annoying. But they're getting kicked back off in a few minutes, and I think, you know, when I'm looking at how Facebook is kind of going after things, I think it doesn't necessarily affect Bitcoin. It doesn't really affect cryptocurrency, because they're focusing on a very different type of, I don't want to say different type of use case, but kind of the same, where you have basically David Marcus saying we're gonna control the onboard and off, we're gonna control the onboarding and the offboarding of this product, and the area for regulation and where a lot of this is going to happen is going to occur within the area for regulation, and the area where this is going to happen is going to occur within the actual wallets themselves. That's going to be where they're going to have the ability to kind of close a lot of this stuff down and control things. I thought there were a few people that were very well educated on what was happening, and there were a few people that were there are a few people that just did not have any idea what they were talking about. A couple different things. If you guys reload the YouTube video, if you're watching right now, if you reload it or just go to your settings, you just have to reset it to 1080p. Should be fine now, but for whatever reason, it was going all nuts. But I can definitely answer some questions right now. Figure we could take the time to do that and shoot the shit a little bit, answer some questions, and then maybe hop back into the video after that. Let me know if you have any questions. I will pop back. Let's fix the screen back. There we are. Why aren't I at work, RC Phantom? I work for myself, bud. Any thoughts how this might affect the price of Bitcoin today? Well, it's mostly been since this started or a little bit beforehand. Bitcoin's up about 5%. Has bounced in the low 9,000s, trading at 97 right now. So as far as thoughts on how this might affect Bitcoin, this is about where we started. So Bitcoin is up pretty nicely at this point. And again, I don't think this doesn't do much in terms of affecting Bitcoin in the long run. Not at least in my mind. And then Freeman says, is Libra bringing positive or negative attention to Bitcoin? I would say mostly positive. I think that people are understanding there is a key differentiation between Libra and Bitcoin, which is something of definite note there. And then Mr. Simpson says, so basically Libra is nothing to invest in. Yes, that's exactly true. The stance Facebook is taking at this point in time is that they are not an investment vehicle. They're trying to be a stable store of value that is, really at a high level, what Facebook is doing is taking a bunch of government currencies, maybe the dollar, the euro, the yen, whatever it might be. They're taking a bunch of government currencies. They're throwing them into basically, they're like one of the congressmen said, basically throwing them into almost like an ETF that is going to be highly liquid and calling that Libra. And so it's going to be a stable because it's not just one fiat currency. It's not just the dollar. It's a bunch of different fiat currencies. Then they're allowing people to kind of have access to a stable store of value. So there'd be absolutely no reason as an individual why you'd want to quote unquote invest in it, because if you do, you're probably going to be devalued at a certain point in time from inflation or whatever. But yeah, it's not going to be a cryptocurrency that pumps to the moon or anything like that. And guys, at this point in time, I've been going live, I think, really for the better part of like 2 hours. So I really actually need to get back to work. So to that point, if you guys are, as always, if you guys are looking at new roles in the crypto space, Proof of Talent has got you hooked up. Got a bunch of different positions right now in San Francisco, New York, Boston, and some really good conversations. Things are moving along very, very well. But if you are in the sales world and the marketing, community management, you are specifically if you are a software engineer or a higher level, could be lead engineer, VP of engineer, definitely feel free to reach out via Twitter. Happy to have a conversation with you about how we could potentially help out from a recruiting standpoint, help you find roles, or if you're hiring as well. But before they get back into that break, I am going to get back into work. But appreciate you guys hanging out for the better part of 2 hours. If you're new to the channel by any chance, make sure to subscribe. If you're on YouTube, shout out to everybody watching on Periscope and Twitch as well. Great to hang out with you guys for the past 2 hours and watch Congress yell and scream and do a bunch of random things that kind of blew my mind in a negative way and go from there. Thank you guys so much for your time. Crypto Bobby signing out. Hope you have a good one. Peace.